church. And so I'm looking for candidates that are going to support, the freedom of meeting, gathering. We have the First Amendment, and we shouldn't be prohibited from exercising those freedoms.
Right. So.
Well, I agree. And if there was ever a time where I feel like we actually have a chance,
exactly.
Right now is the time. I think there's a lot of people, even who may have voted in a different direction. I think we've seen a change of attitude, even in the state of Oregon, which, if you would have told me 5 years ago that people would be open to voting for candidates that I would vote for the state of Oregon, I would have probably not believed them. But right now, I see a really good. We're in a good position, perhaps, to see some good change.
Right.
One of our goals at Athey Creek is to say, how can we be as biblical as possible in everything we do? We ask ourselves that every time we meet as leaders. How can we be more in line with the Bible? And as it turns out, you don't really see a formal membership in the scriptures with the early church. The early church, if they were baptized and if they believed that Jesus died on the cross, was buried, and rose from the grave, they were part of the church. So I believe membership has somehow almost contributed to the artificial divisions.
I wanted to also just, again, remind folks that the election's around the corner. I mentioned in the beginning that we have all the resources that everybody will ever need to make sure you are registered to vote, make sure you are voting in this election. We have this year taken on a big challenge, partnering with Oregon Family Council to translate their famous voter guide. That's Brett. Thank you for coming back. Thank you. This is your third time. We're really happy to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Good. How you feeling?
Good, really good. Look, good things going on.
Yes, it's a busy summer. It's getting cold out there. This weekend is going to start getting really cold.
It's really been strange because the weather's been so nice. I'm still kind of in summer mode.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, you kind of have to. It started late.
It started, and now it's getting dark so early. I just feel like it feels awkward, but I'm ready for the fall.
Good. Yeah. Do you have any major plans for? I know you guys this year, the Athey Creek wanted to do some continuing the construction, but something changed, I'm guessing, right?
Yes. Yeah. We were ready to go, but it's kind of a long story. But basically, we're trying to work with Clackamas County on our conditional use permit. They want us to reapply for a modification. And we're saying we don't want to modify anything from our original CUP. We want to just do exactly what we were approved back in the day, and they're saying that we have to, and that's a very expensive process. And right now, the community around us is fairly volatile with all they're talking about the toll road in 205 and there's a sports complex going in. And so the whole neighborhood really is not wanting to talk about expanding.
Right.
But Athey Creek, we already paid our dues. We did a widening of the on-ramps on the freeway and put traffic lights in. Back when our church was small, we paid the big bill, over $2 million to do that. And basically the county's saying, you got to go back and let's revisit what you need to do next. And we've already done that for our finished product. So anyway, that's where we're at. It might go to litigation at some point, which we're ready to do.
Wow. Is the lawyer that helped during the COVID time, is that the lawyer you're going to be working with?
It's interesting you should ask that. So Jenna Ellis, she helped us with the COVID stuff, but she directed us to a land use attorney that covers RLUPA, which is I forget, Religious Land Use Institutionalized Persons Act. It was in the year 2000. Basically, the federal law says that churches shouldn't have to do more than other institutions. We should be on a level playing field. Yeah. It's a great law that was passed for religious liberty. Clackamas County, I'm pretty sure, is pretty unaware of that rule. But Jenna directed us to the guy who pretty much wrote the law, and he's our attorney, and he's over in Minnesota. Great guy, and he's working with us on whether or not we want to pull the trigger on a federal case. The nice thing about that, the problem with the county putting the brakes on for us is it's costing us a lot of money and time. And with a federal case, you can go for, damages for attorney fees, but also the costs of inflation right now. Because we were ready to pull the trigger over a year ago on the church building. and now building has gone up.
Yeah.
Things are more expensive, plus interest rates. All of that's calculable, and so the county's going to have to probably deal with that, depending on whether or not we go for that. So that's something we're just praying about. Nobody wants to litigate or be, we've never done anything like that, but at the same time, we're a large church, and we kind of want to stand for the smaller churches that sometimes I think the officials can sort of knock around a little bit, and we kind of feel like we're in a position where we can stand for religious liberty. On that.
Good. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. So maybe next year, but maybe not.
Maybe not. Yeah, the Lord. We feel good that the Lord can take it one way or the other, and we're going to be good either way.
Good.
The reason we're building is just we're doing the 5 services, and it just gets tough on all the volunteers, and
right.
And so it'd be nice to expand and go to 3 services.
3 services. Mm-hmm. So 1 Saturday and 2 Sunday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of like
a
how
space
it was
between.
Back.
Yeah.
Good. Well, that's good. It's. I was looking forward to outside services. I thought it was going to be kind of fun.
Yeah.
To do that.
Yeah.
And I think this year you guys haven't done any outside services.
No. Few different reasons, but streaming has become such a big part of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Streaming outside is just a little more difficult. We can do it, but it comes off a little more difficult online. And our watch parties around the country, around the world, really, I think they benefit from us being in the sanctuary.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, that makes sense. Makes sense. Well, one of the obvious things that we're always talk about before we started this program, I was kind of talking to the Slavic community about the election that's coming up. Obviously, very important election, something that we've been talking about for half a year now, because it's really getting close to, and we have 19 days. And it's interesting to watch how there's a good chance some good things are potentially could happen this year. So we're encouraging our community to get out and vote and really just turn out in record numbers, and to really just vote for those who would represent them and represent biblical values. I know Bill is on the ballot and as well, and obviously we're a nonpartisan organization. We can't endorse anybody, but I just wanted to have Bill kind of mention a little bit about kind of why he's running and kind of his plans, because I know he's been here for maybe a couple months back. He shared that he was announcing that he was running.
And announced the race.
So that was kind of fun as well. So how's it going so far?
So that's great. We've got great feedback. And again, the platform is based on fundamentals of my faith.
Right.
And it's been some years back that I realized that our mission field doesn't stop within the walls of the church building or even the walls of my house. It's wherever we go, we're part of that ministry. And something that opened my eyes was when I was given the opportunity to run for an elected position at the Home Builders Association. And I got on the board of directors there, and I served for 3 years, and just recently got reelected for another 3.
Nice.
And when I was given the opportunity to speak to the executive board or our outreach on kind of the builder spotlight moment, I didn't speak about my business or how I grew my business. I told them right there and then that the one thing I could teach them is what not to do, because I've made plenty of mistakes in business. And but the thing that was interesting is the fact that I've got a unique perspective. Some of the things that are happening to the U.S. right now are deja vu moments for things that made us flee our home country as refugees. And the one important thing I wanted to also make sure that all of them understand and see is that me being a refugee from the Soviet Union, I was blessed twice by the American people in a major way. One is that the gospel from the missionaries that came from the United States reached me through the American missionaries. And then when we did flee persecution, we came to the States. We were blessed by the American people that gave us shelter, gave us food, and accepted us in their communities, gave us opportunity to raise our families, to grow our businesses, and be involved. And when I shared that, I was kind of cautious and barely shared my faith other than the fact that, we came here from religious persecution. And I told the congregation there, or the group there, that we were willing to be slaves working the plantations, because that's what the media in Russia told us was going to happen to us, but practice our faith freely. And when we came here, we found out that we were lied to, and the kind of first dosage of what propaganda is, and what it meant to us. But after that, kind of like a testimony, or kind of a quick recap of our story, I was surrounded by people that said, well, I came here to network because I just finished law school, but all I want to know is what church you go to so I could join it and be encouraged to testify about my faith boldly. I was surrounded by folks that were kind of in control, even within the HBA, that said, hey, I'm Christian too, and we got to get together and not talk about, projects and not talk about work, but talk about God. And that kind of opened my eyes to where that's our mission field. And it was kind of like a moment that revealed that to us. And other opportunities we had to speak, I spent more time on the fundamentals and why I'm here and why I'm doing it. And the fact that, yes, I am an evangelical Christian before I'm a father, before I'm a husband, before I'm a business owner, and that we need to stand up and be those leaders and take on the responsibility and help those that are in need. So that, the more I testify, the more I see that this is a mission field,
right,
and something that we're really called to do.
Yeah,
right.
That's so good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Well, I not only I think there's great candidates on the ballot. I think there's other the things that we're voting for essentially is not really for the people, but we're voting for our faith values. And there's a lot of people on there that represent a lot of those things. Personally, I think there's a lot of candidates who are strong on school choice. I think that's a big one nowadays. What are some of the things that for both of you guys when you guys are voting? What do you guys look for in those candidates? What are some of the most important things that is important to you when you look at a candidate? Pastor Brett?
So locally or?
Both, yeah. Both.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think, abortion's at the top of the list. I think that's one of the greatest sins of our nation right now. And so that's always, I always look at each candidate and each measure, how that's going to come out. And
right.
I also like to watch Israel and our posture toward Israel with the candidates because of just what the Bible says about, the nation that blesses Israel will be blessed. I'm not saying that I agree with everything Israel does.
Right.
I'm just saying it's amazing the difference between the various platforms of posturing toward the Jewish people in Israel. And so I think that's a big part of what we should be doing. They shall prosper that love thee, it says in the Psalms. And I think the United States, we have traditionally been blessed for number one, God's grace. But also I think it has something to do with the way we've supported Israel, even when most other nations haven't. So I look for that. Religious liberty is something as a pastor you're always kind of thinking about, and those things are on the ballots, in these elections. We've been watching what happened to the church in the last 2 years with the whole COVID thing, and to me that was a bit of a power grab, a reach, and so I'm looking for candidates that are going to support, the freedom of meeting, gathering. We have the First Amendment, and we shouldn't be prohibited from exercising those freedoms.
Right, and I think if we don't win this election, I would say that the candidates that have more biblical values. I think what we're saying to everything that happened is we don't really care what happened, and I'm afraid that the things that we experienced in the last couple of years, it's only going to get doubled down, and they're going to take the next step and push it even further.
I agree.
So we need to stand strong and vote in ways that will show that we're not happy with how things went last election and just last couple of years, and we need to do something about it. So.
Well, I agree, and if there was ever a time where I feel like we actually have a chance,
exactly.
Right now is the time. I think there's a lot of people, even who may have voted in a different direction. I think we've seen a change of attitude, even in the state of Oregon, which, if you would have told me 5 years ago that people would be open to voting for candidates that I would vote for for the state of Oregon, I would have probably not believed them. But right now, I see a really good. We're in a good position, perhaps, to see some good change.
Right. Well, I want to go back a little bit to the abortion question, because I think it seems like for a while, back in the days before I think the Catholic Church was mostly passionate about that question, and most of the evangelical churches were not really involved in it. Do you remember that time, and what was the reason that the evangelical church wasn't really involved in that question?
Well, you're probably talking to the wrong guy on that one. I feel like the evangelicals, we've always believed that generally. That's my,
because Catholics were originally very passionate about it, right?
The Catholics, and with their influence and money, and the Pope has kind of a international platform or stage. So I think they were maybe better at voicing those concerns, but I think maybe if there was a thing the church was guilty of, if I could say, is apathy in voting. It's not that the evangelical church didn't see the error and sin of abortion. It's just that they didn't think their vote counted or mattered, and so there was a little. It seemed to me like there was a little apathy, and that's not helped the cause at all. But I do think with this overturning of Roe versus Wade, it's definitely put it back on the radar. And I think with technology and science, and now we can see these, what the unborn baby really is, and how we're doing these surgeries. What do they call it? Where they go in before the baby's even born, and prenatal surgery. We just know more now, and it's so clear that that's a life that God is forming. I think just the science is waking some people up. The Bible's clear for millennia that the Lord is forming a little child in a mother's womb, and He preordained that life, and the Bible's been clear on that. But I think now we're just catching up with our understanding scientifically.
Well, when Roe was reversed, I'm curious, what was your reaction to that? Because I couldn't believe it.
I was shocked. I thought that wouldn't happen, even though that was what I was praying for.
Right.
But I also, my response was for 10 seconds rejoicing.
Right.
And then right after that thinking, this is going to be a big battle. It's just going to open this up. It didn't, prevent abortion in America. It just changed the rule of Roe versus Wade, which to me, overturning that was something that should have been done a long time ago. Right. But now, everybody's hardening their positions. And so that's going to be the thing we need to be, it's game on right now.
Right. Well, I remember hearing somebody said something that I think was very, very interesting. Back before when we had Roe versus Wade, we had the excuse of really not, fighting against abortion. Right? There was Roe versus Wade. We can't do anything. Right now, I think we have the ability now to fight even more to prevent that. So there's no more excuse why you shouldn't, defend the pro-life question. Mm-hmm. So I think as believers, we don't have the excuse anymore to just sit back and not do anything, because we have the path has been open for us.
I agree. Totally agree.
Yeah.
It seems like the decision was brought a little closer to home. Now the states decide.
Right.
To where it's
exactly
feels as if it's a little more in our control.
And it is interesting to watch the various states and their response. Yeah. I mean, the red states, blue states that's one of the biggest divides, and you're going to see which states are going, and some have taken already a very strong stance, but Oregon, we still have a lot of work to do on that one.
Yeah, I agree. I noticed there's in the Christian community and Slavic community, there's a big divide, because there's still a lot of Christians I feel that believe like rape and incest is acceptable abortion. What do you tell folks who have that position, who don't really take a strong stance?
Yeah, that's a great question. To me, it's the key is compassion. And so when people ask that question, they believe somehow it's lacking in compassion to not consider a rape victim. But having been one who's helped women through times in our church when they've had an abortion, even in a situation of rape or incest, it's still it's a horrible, hurtful situation in a person's life. And to me, what people don't think about is the psychology or the soul of the woman who's going through not only something as bad as rape, but then to go through 10 years, 20 years later, the grief of the loss of that life, even though it was something that was a horrible situation to begin with. So I always like to, the math of it is pretty clear. It's that just because it was conceived in such a horrible situation, that doesn't change the nature of the life in that mother's womb. And so we believe that it's still a life. And then if we take that stand and position, which we do, we also have to equally come alongside of the woman and the situation and lovingly care for them, help them through the emotional trauma that's involved with all of that. I'm one who's seen it. I've seen where the women who've been brave and delivered that child, we see that child, now with years, we've seen those children become amazing people, and those mothers don't have the regrets that others would. And I just believe that it's such a funny thing because they make that the crux of their argument. What about the rape?
That's
and
true, yeah.
And I do have a good answer for that. It's just that's such a marginal issue. They're just really wanting to defend their abortions. Such a tiny percentage. Yeah. So let's be real about the real problem. And I do think we need to handle rape and incest as something as very serious, and we need to lovingly, with compassionate, deal with that. But let's be real. That's not what we're talking about. Millions and millions of babies being aborted out of convenience, or out of people just feeling like they're not ready. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, for sure. Yeah, it does. Bill, I know you shared before. Your your growth when it comes to like actually wanting to vote, and before you were against voting, now you're for voting. Some similar question to Bill. What was something that what are some of the things that you look at when you look at the ballot? What are some of the things that are important to you?
So I wouldn't say I was against voting. I just didn't think the vote mattered.
Like a lot of us,
Again, that mentality that was embedded in me from even the Soviet era, right, to where you just don't trust your government. And we kind of all suspected and assumed and believed that the government had some sort of voting there to kind of make everybody be quiet and say, we gave you opportunity, and still do what they want to do in a corrupt way. Until I got to know some people that literally lost because of a handful of votes. And these people lost to folks that were supporting things that they say are pro-choice, but we know pro-choice, very one-sided, right? Because there's only one voice that's being able to speak up. And I saw the importance of the Slavic community in general, because I wasn't alone. Right. I was a perfect, terrible example. And when we all wake up, and the more we work in Slavic Vote, we realize it's not just the Slavic community. It's broader than that.
It really is.
The Christian community in general have other things to do. Yeah. It's either we're busy with our families, or we're busy with our businesses, or busy with our ministries.
Yep.
And kind of keep putting this off to the side to where it's still important.
Yeah.
And that was kind of one of the main reasons. And yes, the candidate I spoke to that lost was a conservative, and they were pro-life. And that was one of the biggest issues for me as well, to where, I'd rather have somebody represent me that has similar values. Yeah. And if I don't do my part to help that person represent me, then I really don't have an excuse for what's going on.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Thank you.
I hope that answers the question.
That's good.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you. I guess my next question was, on one thing that I wanted to, last time we spoke, we didn't get into all the questions that the community was asking. And during the time, I think the Ukraine war was just starting, or it was really just kind of the beginning. I know you had a whole prophecy update on that, and some people were wondering, kind of like your was there, I know you had a great presentation, and what was the response from the community that you got, if you remember?
Well, I got mixed responses, and I think it's heartbreaking for me to see the division in the Slavic community, because before that conflict, I I probed some of my Ukrainian friends, my Russian friends, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression was that here in the United States, the Slavic community kind of said, you know what, we're going to be brothers and we're going to stand together and kind of put aside our differences to a degree. But this has only surfaced some real tension and we've seen real division. You know, in the Slavic community in Athey Creek, we're spending more time trying to remind people to keep as much as you can a Christ-like attitude and compassion and love one another, and but at the same time, it's a very ugly conflict, and I think that there's a pressure for a guy like me to come down on one side on that, and I'm the last guy. You guys, if you've been around, I'm one that's not afraid to share my opinions,
right?
And I have talked to a large part of our Slavic community, and I still don't know what to think, honestly, other than I'm just heartbroken to see what's happening. There's some really ugly things happening, and war is ugly. And but what do I really know? I think that before I really land on any particular side of the Ukrainian-Russian issue, I see corruption. I think at the prophecy update, I said I see corruption in the Ukrainian government. I see corruption in the Russian government. And maybe the worst one I see right now is corruption in the United States government. Like I feel like we are a world right now that's given to some really sinful, dastardly leadership. So I think we need to be praying for those. Like, First Timothy chapter 2 says that, first of all, we're supposed to pray for leaders and those who are in authority over us. And so while much of what's happening in Ukraine right now is kind of out of my circle of influence, that's where I am encouraging our church to be praying for the Ukrainian people, praying for the Russian people, and that the Lord would intervene. There is that interesting twist for me on the Bible prophecy part of it, and when the Bible talks about the Gog-Magog invasion, and Putin does kind of fit that description to some degree, but like I told the prophecy update, who knows what's going to happen in the next months. I don't try to predict the future, but right. I do like to see what the Bible says, and the stage is kind of set for, even watching the Russian-Israel tension right now. That's I keep my eye on that just as a Bible prophecy issue, and those things are getting tense between Israelis and the Russians. That should be of a concern to a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, for sure. How about you, Bill? Do you have any thoughts on any of that?
Well, I could speak a little bit on the prophecy update. I was sure glad to see or hear you say that it's all propaganda.
Yeah.
There's limited truth, and it's just a point of view and a choice of only seeing one bit of a situation. Yeah. And we've been talking about it for a long time, to where I'm Russian, my wife's Ukrainian. My wife's got family in Russia and family in Ukraine. Wow. And I mean, there's so much division to where people are told a partial truth on both sides. Mm-hmm. And, the folks that are dying, the folks that are suffering have nothing to do with it. Yeah. They're in a sense, innocent people when it comes to this conflict. And they're suffering the biggest burden of the consequences of war. Part. Yeah. So sure. That's my stance. I think we as believers in general, I think we gotta look at the hurt and the pain and the suffering and help that, versus trying to figure out who's the lesser of the evils and try to support that evil. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Well, I want to take a quick second to just thank some of our sponsors, because there were some of our sponsors we're thankful for being here because of them. So I just want to highlight a few of them that we always do. Pilmeni is one of them. We got Red Hills Construction, which is Bill. Thank you, Bill, for that. We also have America Best Realty, Exceptional Homes, Cibaroni, Nina Martinova. Then we also have True House. That's Victoria, who does a great job doing the websites. She redesigned her website, does a great job with that. Solution 820 and Start Here and Gold Cup, which is a great coffee place that's in Vancouver.
I don't know if you missed the Imperial cabinets.
Imperial cabinets. I didn't cover all of them because
Gotcha.
we have more than I could go through this program. So we appreciate all of our sponsors, and that's definitely one of them. So thank you. We appreciate all of our sponsors that we have because they give us the opportunity to be on these programs and to share our message. So I appreciate that. Another question that last time we didn't get to that I've heard a couple times asked. So Athey Creek doesn't have membership. And Slavic churches, most of them do have membership. And I do see some people kind of find that very important in the Slavic community. Has that question ever been come up with in the Athey Creek as an importance? Is that even a thing in the American churches? Because I don't think I've seen that too much in American churches, and the importance of it and why the Athey Creek doesn't do it.
Yeah, I think it's become less important in the American church. When I was a kid, I'm going to say most churches had a membership, a formal membership process. I think what happened was in the American church, membership may have been a little abused, and it was in a way a chance to lock people in and make sure they were tithing, and sort of, and maybe the intention was even innocent, to help them be obedient,
Right.
But when we started Athey Creek back in 1996, we prayed about that, and one of our goals at Athey Creek is to say, how can we be as biblical as possible in everything we do? We ask ourselves that every time we meet as leaders. How can we be more in line with the Bible? And as it turns out, you don't really see a formal membership in the scriptures with the early church. The early church, if they were baptized and if they believed that Jesus died on the cross, was buried, and rose from the grave, they were part of the church. So I believe membership has somehow almost contributed to the artificial divisions within denominations, but also, I'm a member of this church, or I'm a member of that church. And we've just felt really strongly that this was a time to start a church and say, if you're a Christian who's been baptized, and say, if you're a member of this church. And I understand also tracking people, knowing where they are, knowing how you can help them, keeping... that's one reason why churches have membership as well. And Athey Creek does that to a degree without membership. We keep tabs on people that are in the hospital, and when people are hurting and going through difficult times, we have formal lists that we care for people. So we want people to feel like they're very much a part of our church, but without coercing. We feel like if I'm going to get somebody to sign up for something at Athey Creek, it's the number one thing is that they repent of their sins and confess Christ as their Savior. And as soon as I add to that, it becomes, it can almost convolute the simple message of the gospel. So we've just decided to keep it simple. I'm not opposed to churches that have membership, and I understand why they do. For us, though, that's why we've said let's do what the early church did and model our church after that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's something that comes up often when I do have a conversation about Athey Creek and to the Slavic folks and friends about the membership, which is interesting. And that leads usually to some other questions that I won't get into today. We had a few movie questions. One of the questions was, what's your take on the TV show The Chosen?
Oh boy!
I think you might have
my short answer or my long answer.
I know that you briefly mentioned it a few times during some of the sermons with Matthew, and the last time I remember was positive. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I do have some positive things to say about it. As a person who likes entertainment, I think it's entertaining to see somebody's take on Jesus and the stories of the Bible. And I have to admit, Debbie and I, we watched the first season and a half, I think. And we really liked the woman at the well. There was some kind of touching moments there, and I'm like, wow, that story, it was neat in that way. So as a person who likes entertainment, it was cool. It was neat. As a Bible teacher, I'm sitting there the whole time going, well, that's wrong, and that's taking a little bit liberty and license. I'm ultra critical,
right?
And I just love the scriptures, and I want to stick to it. I understand that they're taking creative license with the story. So as long as everybody understands that, I'm okay with it. Here's probably my biggest concern. and that is the what's the name of the guy who did it?
The producer.
Drawing a blank. Yeah, Steven something maybe. I forget it.
Yeah.
One of the things he has said, and I don't think he meant to be controversial when he said it, but it suddenly put him in an interesting category when he said, "I'm just presenting the authentic Jesus." And that's where I said, well, no, he's not actually. The Bible, this is the authentic Jesus, and he's giving us his creative take on who Jesus was and the actor. So we have to be really careful with those kinds of terms when we talk about the authentic Jesus, because, I'll tell you, like just one small example, Jesus did not need Matthew's help in coming up with his Sermon on the Mount. And they present it like Matthew was giving him some pointers on his Sermon on the Mount, and I just don't believe that's a biblical kind of notion. But creatively, I'm not going to say, well, it's a heresy and that's a horrible thing. If you watched The Chosen, you're in big trouble. Right. I don't believe that. But as long as we say this is somebody's take on what they think the story of Jesus looked like.
Right. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I know. I just watched the third season trailer, and it looks really good. So.
Yeah, the story, the way they really do bring it home as far as reminding people this was a real story that really happened, and I think there's something about The Chosen that is nice about that part. Where I think going to Israel does the same thing for me. When you travel to Israel, you realize this really happened. There were real people in these real places, and I think The Chosen does kind of help people see. Just the truth that it was a real story with real people, real characters.
Right, for sure. And then this other question, I think you mentioned before a few times in the church, and so I think you addressed this a little bit, but the movie The Shack. I guess a few maybe points specifically about The Shack, and what was exactly that you thought there was... if you can address that.
I never saw the movie, but I did read the book.
Or the book, yeah.
And the book, I'm concerned just, it's, again, somebody presenting Jesus as they see Jesus, and the whole, even the gospel message. And people almost get more teary-eyed about a fake story that's kind of allegory, more than they do about the real story of Jesus. And I feel like The Shack presented only only part of the story, and not even that accurately, because it was done in sort of an allegorical way. I believe it's dangerous when we start presenting Jesus in sort of who we like to think he is. I think we need to present Jesus as the Jesus of the Bible, and really stick with that, and don't go in and out of different interpretations. I don't believe the author of The Shack meant for it to become sort of a book of theology, but it became that. A lot of people almost put The Shack right up there with their King James Bible, and I have an issue with that. You don't see the full. Jesus was gracious, and they marveled at his gracious words, and he was anointed with the oil of gladness and kind and compassionate. But he also turned the tables, and he also called out the Pharisees and spoke of the wrath to come. That's the side that a lot of times these books will leave out. I think it's critical to get the full picture.
Right. Bill, have you seen any of those two
I cannot
titles?
Comment. I have not. No.
I think it's good. You're not missing anything.
But, taking it back to Scripture, I mean, even a sermon, everybody kind of preaches the gospel the way they see it and the way it was closest to them, and we got to take it all with a grain of salt, especially when we do have the Word of God that we could compare it to.
Right here.
So.
Right.
And Acts 17:11, search the Scriptures, be like the Bereans, search the Scriptures daily to see if what that person is saying is true or false. And I feel like the church has neglected that duty that we have with things like The Chosen or The Shack. I think we should measure and say, well, that's a nice attempt, but let's make sure and let's look at the authentic Jesus that's actually in the Bible.
Right. Well, thank you. Another question that I jot down here, growing up, name a few people that influenced you mostly, and then versus now, who's some of the people that you look up to, I guess, or that influenced you?
Well, I think number one, my mom and dad, they were great influences. I never knew my parents as non-believers. They accepted the Lord right before I was born.
Oh, wow.
I hear stories about my dad before he was a Christian. He was quite I guess people were pretty afraid of him.
Interesting.
And he was in construction, heavy construction, when I was born. But I only knew my dad as a strong Christian man who loved the Lord and had a real heart for the Word. And so that was the strongest influence by far, as my parents. Then when I was 10 years old, we had a young 23-year-old pastor move to our community who, my parents, we in construction, we'd travel from town to town. Dad would build a bridge or a dam, or he was a superintendent, young superintendent. So we'd go to whatever church we could find in those communities. So I it's funny, I remember all those churches pretty clearly. And everything from more of a Pentecostal side of things, we'd go to those churches, and sometimes a little more on the Baptist side. And I saw the different flavors of church. So when this young guy moved to our community and just started teaching the Bible verse by verse, as a 10-year-old kid, we didn't have a Sunday school class, but I loved hearing this guy just teach the Bible. And eventually he became my pastor and my boss and my brother-in-law as the years went by. I particularly, I love his early teaching, back in the 80s. That changed my life, and just having a love for the Word of God. And so, growing up with that he's the one who kind of inspired me to, along with J. Vernon McGee. I loved, listening to old J. Vernon verse by verse through the Bible. And those two Bible teachers probably were the number one influence that made me want to teach the Bible, and also verse by verse, chapter by chapter. That's kind of my early heroes of the faith growing up. Today, it's mostly the guys that have long been dead and written amazing works. I've read every Spurgeon sermon.
Oh, wow.
Charles Haddon Spurgeon. I love Spurgeon's teaching. G. Campbell Morgan. I like Warren Wiersbe. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Warren Wiersbe's commentaries. He was a gifted Bible teacher. So usually the people that were heavy on Bible teaching, those are the ones I tend to love. I think people would be rewarded to read Warren Wiersbe's commentaries, and there's some really good stuff in there.
All right. So nobody currently that's out there right now.
I think if I could say someone who inspires me right now is Greg Laurie. Are you familiar with Greg Laurie?
Yep.
The reason I love Greg is he's been consistent for a long time, just sharing the gospel, and he's sort of doing the Harvest Crusades, sort of in the old kind of a updated version of what Billy Graham was doing.
Right.
And
he worked for him. Or he was part of the team back when he was younger.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He and Billy were friends, and they interacted. And Billy even said, "You're going to take the baton from me." And Greg shifted from Calvary Chapel to what was Billy? He was Southern Baptist Convention, I think. And so Greg shifted over to that. A lot of people don't even know that.
Really? I didn't know.
But he's still doing the same thing he's always been doing. And here's Greg. I think he's nearing 70 years old.
Really? Wow.
But he still has a spring in his step, and he just faithfully teaches the Word. So I'm a big fan of Greg Laurie. It's funny. I've never met Greg. I think we know of each other, and our teams talk together because our churches are very similar.
Right.
And so my administrative team, they're talking with his administrative team. We've compared notes, through the whole COVID season and other issues. It's so our churches have cooperated because we're similar in size and just dealing with similar things. But he's down in Orange County, Riverside.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, I know he was always on the Calvary Chapel Radio. And I thought he was still part of the Calvary Chapel, but I guess he still has that strong position, and they love airing him. Yeah,
Calvary Chapels, have kind of split into two main groups. Once Chuck went to heaven, the Calvary Chapels have split, and so they've all kind of gone different ways. And but Greg's one of those early guys of that Calvary Chapel movement, along with my pastor, John Corson, was also part of that movement, and along with Skip Heitzig, Raul Rees, there's a whole list of guys that were through the Bible teachers back in the 70s and 80s.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any people that influenced you over the years that you want to share?
Well, absolutely. Like my parents, I think are great inspiration because even the move, coming to the States, not knowing where you're going, and the slightest hope is that you could practice your faith. And at that time, my dad was my age, and he had 11 kids, not 5 kids that I have. And we think about it over and over, like, would I make a move like that? And I would tell you one thing: it's just being led by the Spirit.
Right.
And that was their approach, and kind of knowing what God has done and having testimony in the works that my dad was doing, and knowing that it's the work of the Lord, and it wasn't something as easy as jumping on a plane and flying over here. It literally took 2 months to get here. It was kind of crossing through Europe and getting visas from country to country and finally making it here.
Right. So
that's huge inspiration. And then folks that just stand up in their faith, Mike Pompeo is a great inspiration to where, a person in his position and being able to, start his messages or his speeches with a simple phrase: "I, Mike Pompeo, evangelical Christian," and doing that in a Muslim country if he had to, and being able to stand up and say, "This is what I am. Our country is founded on this, like it or not."
Yep.
And we are here to say it if we need to say it. Right. And I think people that are in positions to where they have a lot of weight, and represent a lot of people, and be able to represent those that don't really have much of a voice. So
to me, Dr. Dobson has been someone that I really enjoyed.
Likewise.
He's like 80, maybe more, and he's one thing I love about him. He's over 80 years old, and he doesn't give up. He doesn't retire.
Yeah,
he keeps on going and doing his thing, and
that's impressive.
Yeah. Have you been folling him for a while?
Yeah. I years ago we had him come and speak. That's back before he was super well known. This is when I was a kid. But I followed him ever since. He helped, I read all his books about raising kids, and that was helpful. Like he's been so helpful to so many Christians.
Yeah, I know he still has a radio program that he does, and he's staying, doing everything he can to stay healthy and to continue the mission that he's originally started. So I think his message is probably more relevant than ever before.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because
he was warning that this stuff is going to come, and it's happening in front of his eyes.
I think he was dismissed by some because they thought he was predicting things that were going to be too radical. But as it turns out, he was hitting the nail on the head.
Exactly. Yeah. I do enjoy him. And how would you say, how can a person discern from a good and bad influence, or what would be a good source of influence? I can probably guess, obviously, biblical as well. But what else could you add to that?
Yeah, I just keep pounding that drum. It's the word, it's the word, it's the word. I do believe that one of the manifestations of the Holy Spirit, when you ask for that, Lord, fill me afresh with your Holy Spirit, is He does give us discernment, and I think we should lean heavily on that. One of the most dangerous sayings I think that's out there is just follow your heart. Go with your heart. And Jeremiah says your heart is just desperately wicked, deceitful above all things. So I don't follow my heart, but I do ask the Lord to give me discernment. I think the word is the blueprint. It's black and white, very clear, what we're supposed to do. But on the little nuanced things, and when we're looking at who we're going to follow, who our leaders are, I think discernment goes a long way, especially if you're getting that from the Holy Spirit. I think Christians, we have an advantage in that sense, that we have the Spirit within us to give us that discernment.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. As we get closer to the end of our program, I wanted to also just, again, remind folks that the election's around the corner. I mentioned in the beginning that we have all the resources that everybody will ever need to make sure you are registered to vote, make sure you are voting in this election. We have this year taken on a big challenge, partnering with Oregon Family Council to translate their famous voter guide. It's been around for over 40 years, and we just talked about it previously. The last time we had a faith-based governor, let's just say that. It's been 40 years, so this could be the year that that things could change and start going to the right direction. Maybe not perfect. Yeah. It's definitely not going to be perfect, but it's going to be something that could lead to a better future. So we encourage everybody to get out and vote. And if you need these material, these voter guides, you could obviously find that on our website. You can find on the Oregon Family Council website. You can also find it at your Russian church, or you can find it there because we're going to be sending boxes to the churches that are here in the Slavic community all around Oregon, all around Vancouver area. So stop by your church, and I'm hoping if you're listening and you are a leader in the church, you will not throw these away, because that would be unfortunate, but we will be sending to majority of the churches. If for any reason you haven't gotten it, reach out to us. We would love to send you more. And of course, like always, on our website, we have a voter recommendations, our partnership with SV Action. They do a great job just looking through all the candidates that Oregon Family Council recommended, and their, where they stand on certain values. And obviously, Oregon Family Council cannot endorse anybody, but SV Action can, and they can recommend folks. So they make it even easier. So if you want to know more about each candidate, this is a great resource. If you just want to vote and you're busy, then obviously that's another resource that's available for you. So again, by visiting slavicvote.org, you can find all that information, and we'll have that on our website here in a couple of days. We're going to have it available tonight, and then starting tomorrow, we should have most of the material available. So thank you for everybody who were part of this project. I know it's been a lot of work, who have put a lot of effort into this, and huge thanks to Oregon Family Council, because they do a great job of just sourcing all of this, and we couldn't have done it without them. So I thank them, and we just had their executive director, Jack, who was with us just last program. We spoke with him, got to know him more, and he shared about the organization, that they were strictly focused on just bringing resources to the faith-based community, to the Christian community, and to get more people out and voting. So they've done Thank you for tuning in to Slavic Vote Live. We really appreciate you listening to this program. Don't forget to click that like button, subscribe, and share this program with your friends and family. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Кандидаты, стремления. Новая программа Slavic Vote Live. Каждую неделю в прямом эфире. Slavic Vote
I want to take a moment to thank all of our sponsors for allowing us to be here on this program and all of our future programs. Some of those sponsors are Pelmeni, Nina Martinov, a real estate broker, America's Best Realty, Exceptional Homes, Dream House Construction, Imperial Cabinets, Solution 8020, Gold Cup Coffee House, Red Hills Construction, Ciberoni, Lanos Floral, Third House Media, and some others. Without these companies, without these organizations, we couldn't be on this program. And if you would like to be our next sponsor, reach out to us by visiting slavicvote.org. We would love to partner with you and further our mission. Thank you very much.